It's 2025, a new year and the best time to turn your great idea into a business. Shopify is how you're going to make it happen. Let me tell you how. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. Get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. All you need to do is drag and drop. Their powerful social media tools let you connect all your channels and create shoppable posts. Established in 2025. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/promo.
I will acknowledge the Conservative Party made mistakes. We announced that we would leave the European Union before we had a plan for growth outside the EU.
Welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the side hustle to our Thursday full-time job. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi. Alex, we've got some changes to our rota next week as we... Changes! As we brace for Storm Trump. Shall we let people know what they are?
Oh, yeah, we do. So, previous guest, Matthew McGregor, who was there with us, I think, the day after the election results, with Naomi and I will be watching the inauguration on Monday, so we can record a kind of instant react for a late night, early morning podcast drop, depending on how long it goes for and how quick I can edit it.
And how quickly I can overcome being exposed to that much country music in one evening. And then we're going to be joined by another Quiet Riot regular, Dr. Brian Class, for the main show that this week, listeners, is going to go out on Friday. So please don't panic when your usual Thursday morning routine isn't punctuated by a Quiet Riot episode appearing in your subscription box, but it will be there the following morning, Friday.
So it'll be a USA heavy week, meaning today... let's devote the central chunk of this show slightly closer to home. I'd like to talk about Starmer's Ukraine/Poland visit, the economy having a much better week, and since we're on economic stuff, I was interested in Kemi Badenoch's musings about pensions.
And of course, there is a little old thing called a ceasefire in Gaza to chat about too. And then I thought if we do have time at the end, maybe 5 minutes on the potential death of TikTok in America.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, actually. Before we begin, a regular plea to sign up as a monthly backer for as little as £5 a month, if you can, by heading over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. And a big, big thank you if you already do.
And we are now just a week away from our next editorial meeting for our backers. So get in quick if you want to join that. And if you can't afford to back us at the moment, you can still send us your feedback and we'll throw that into the mix. quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Let's crack on with the show.
Quiet Riot. Well, in the olden days of political podcasting, Alex, you might remember we had Good Dominic and Bad Dominic.
Yeah.
Good Dominic Grieve, Bad Dominic Cummings, Bad Dominic Raab. And in a retro move, this week, while we see the return of Bad Donald Trump, there is a ray of sunshine from Good Donald Tusk. Having been president of the European Council during most of the Brexit years, he is now back on the scene as Polish PM, and while Poland has the presidency of the Council of the EU. And he met Keir Starmer this week and once again brought out the emotive hits he is so famous for, saying his dream is not of Brexit, but of Breturn. Here's a clip.
I am aware this is a dream of mine.
Breturn.
That instead of a Brexit, we will have a Breturn. Perhaps I am labouring under an illusion. I'd rather be an optimist and harbour these dreams in my heart. Sometimes they come true in politics.
Alex, I was watching Starmer closely throughout those words. And to me, and you'll probably tell me this is wishful thinking, while Starmer kept really good poker face, I think I caught a glint of glee in his eyes. What did you make of it? I mean, obviously there is plenty to agree on in terms of defence and security, but how do you think Starmer felt standing next to a man talking up how, wonderful a country the UK is and how much more closely aligned Europe wants to be with it again?
Yeah, I mean, that's been his thing all along. We miss you. I think it is wishful thinking, to be honest. I'll tell you why, because I was watching really closely as well. I was like, how's he going to react to that? The problem was that because the interpreter is slightly out of sync in his ear with what Donald Tusk was actually saying, it was very difficult to judge what words precisely he was reacting to because he was on a slight delay and you don't know how much. But I will say this, I kind of expected him to then come in and say, well, as we've committed, we're not going to be
doing
ever
this,
rejoining.
Red lines, poor.
His usual thing, and he didn't.
No,
he didn't say anything on it. So I think that is I mean, the mood music is better, especially at that conference. I thought it was a genuinely warm exchange outside the common interests and the show that politics puts on always for journalists. I thought there was a genuine simpatico there.
I do too. And I also think that the EU needs to look at the opportunity they've got in front of them at the moment as a gift and something to seize. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Labour have got 411 MPs. They've got, probably one less now because of the Mike Amesbury stuff and all of that, but an enormous majority in Parliament. And when we look at what's happening with the polling and all of the mood music around reform and the Tories combining to be 50% of the vote and all the rest of it, if I was the EU, I would be thinking, I've got the friendlies here now. They might not be Lib Dem, SNP, Green friendly on Europe, but they're much friendlier than a reform dragging Conservative Party would be. We're 4.5 years away from the next general election, maybe less. So now is the chance, now is the opportunity for the EU to bake in stuff that would be very difficult for a Eurosceptic government to unwind. And I'm sure listeners will say, well, isn't this part of the problem? The EU are never going to really want to give us anything meaningful while we can violently swing from Eurosceptic to more Europhilic government every few years, and you're going to keep us in this constant bind of undoing things. But the fact of the matter is Johnson baked into the shit deal that he signed with Europe, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, a 5-year review. That's not just a one-off that, after the first 5 years, we'll have a look at it, which is the TCA review that's coming up at the end of this year. It is baked in forever. It is going to be a never-ending review of the decision to leave the EU. And so they will be negotiating with a different government, whether it is a Labour government Mark II, a Lib Lab coalition government, a Reform Conservative government, whatever, in 10 years' time. So really they need to be capitalising on this now. And I think Tusk gets that. And I think he was the man sent out to do some kind of difficult to squirm away from love. I mean, it's pretty hard to be horrible to somebody who is showing you quite so much ankle as Donald did to Keir.
It's also interesting that Tusk is successful where precisely I think the Remain campaign failed and where actually the European project in general fails to press its appeal across Europe is that he makes the emotional point. He makes the emotional connection. He goes for hearts rather than minds. It's not a coincidence that he is also the person to reverse this trend of ever rightwards governments in European countries, especially former Eastern Bloc European countries, by going in and saying, look, I'm kind of soft center right, but I need to work with centre people, soft centre left people, because what we need to do now is defeat the far right. And he's ended up prime minister by putting together quite a broad coalition.
Yep.
And it now looks as if it is the right-wing vote that is splintering ahead of the presidential election that's coming up in Poland. And so, God bless Donald Tusk. I think he's kind of pointing the way
for how
for a
everyone else
lot of this stuff on how to do it.
I completely agree. I've long loved him, as you well know. Never met him. Absolutely would love to. So Donald's team, if you're listening, have Quiet Riot come over and do an interview with him. Quiet Riot. Right, let's move on to your favourite topic. And that is that this week there's been an improvement for the UK government on the economic front. The IMF reported its expectation that the UK economy will grow by 1.6% in 2025. That's up from their previous forecast of 1.5%. Mm-hmm. And they expect the Bank of England to do 4 rate cuts over the year.
Yeah.
And we've seen quite a significant drop in gilt yields in the last week or so, haven't we, Alex? After a short sell-off, the 10-year bonds have recovered. So I want to ask you, are those who cried, Reeves is doing a trust just a few short days ago, now guilty as charged?
Oh, no, you didn't.
I went there. I did it.
Oh, no, you didn't.
I did.
I mean, the total press silence of this has been maddening. From people who were following every tiny little, rise in the gilt rates and every tiny little drop in pound sterling for 2 weeks breathlessly, trying to will it into a full-blown crisis, saying, will Rachel Reeves survive this? And then this week, you get inflation coming in lower than expected, with the underlying data of that much better than expected. So core inflation, much lower than expected. Services inflation, lower than expected, which does now mean the Bank of England is much more likely to do another rate cut. I will return to the point I made during the week that these things are a beauty contest, right? They are comparative.
Yep.
And what's significant about the IMF upgrading its expectations of the UK economy is again in context, because some people might say, well, they're saying 1.6 instead of 1.5. No, but the point is they're saying that while downgrading everyone else and while saying they expect significant headwinds from the US. So they plug all that stuff into the mix and still come up with a better number for the UK. So it's not insignificant, right? Rachel Reeves is off to Davos next week, so she'll be touting for a lot of investment and might come back with some more good news. But, it was significant. Like, I'm looking at the chart now for 30-year gilts, which is the one that everyone was watching. And if you look at it like over a month's period, it is now at where it was at the very beginning of January, sort of January 6th, January 7th, which was when it first started to climb. So in the space of 3 days, it's reversed all that pretty big, like 2.5, 3 point rise, which had happened very gradually. So it's significant, and yet it's simply not being reported. Like, no one is going, okay, perhaps Rachel Reeves did know what she was talking about. Maybe cancelling her trip to China and signalling crisis would have been wrong. Maybe the expectation that things weren't going to settle when every market watcher was saying, chill out. And the FTSE 100 hit record highs, all-time record highs this week. Now, that is affected by the strength of the dollar, because the FTSE 100 consists of large multinationals and a lot of drilling, mining companies that basically post profits in dollars. So the dollar being strong makes a big difference. But if you look at the FTSE 250, that has also recovered. It's not, it's not going up with the same rate because it's not being helped by the strength of the dollar, but it's still sort of reversed the dip it had. And the FTSE 250 is almost exclusively UK blue chip. And so This has been a good week for Rachel Reeves.
You wouldn't know it if you read any newspaper.
Well, exactly. And that concerns me because people looking at their headlines are always left with that last impression. I don't think they go and look at gilt rates and see if it's reversed. So they will still think that the economy is in terrible trouble, and that affects consumer confidence. So what the right-wing press has been doing last week is quite literally the thing they've been accusing everyone else of doing throughout the Brexit years. They've been talking Britain down.
Absolutely. While we're on the subject of public finances, let's talk about Kemi Badenoch, opposition leader and infamous swerver of sandwiches, who had a spicy interview this week on LBC, where she appeared to hint that the Conservatives might seek to means test the state pension. And that was in response to a question about the pensions triple lock. Let's have a little listen to what she said.
There are some people that get the pension or get the triple lock applied to it who do not need it. So shouldn't we look at that?
So that's exactly the sort of thing that the policy work we're going to be doing will look at. I have always said that we don't do means testing.
We're going to look at the triple lock.
I know we're going to look at means testing. Means testing is something which we don't do properly here.
Since then, of course, Labour, Lib Dems, Reform UK, they've all come out and attacked the Conservatives as people who aren't going to be looking after your pension. Your pension won't be safe for them if you back them. So she has rowed back a bit. But Alex, I'm old enough to remember a couple of months ago when she made similar suggestions about cutting maternity pay. And I sort of can't help but feel we're in a situation with Badenoch that when someone shows you who they are the first time, you need to believe them.
She doesn't do gaffes, so I don't know what you're talking about. She has famously said she thinks very carefully about everything she says and never has to go back and explain it.
No misspeaking.
I think the two things are very different, okay, because I think reducing maternity pay is a genuinely baffling, batty thing. I think reviewing the way pensions work is actually quite a sensible policy. And I was a little bit disappointing that everyone kind of jumped on it and booed, because the triple lock is a mad thing. It's a mad policy. It resulted in perverse stuff, especially around the pandemic, when you had like a complete incongruity between inflation and wage growth, and you're always going, oh, we'll take the best one and increase. You know, if you look at the graph of what happened to like wages as opposed to what happened to pensions during that period, it's crazy. You know, pensions just shot up. That going hand in hand with a situation where you're giving very rich pensioners that state pension as well, while you're also really punishing the younger generation in terms of everything, having to pay for higher education, not being able to get anywhere near the housing market, shit jobs, shit career prospects, no freedom of movement, Brexit, you know, all of that stuff that really heavily impacts the younger generation. You know, while pensions just go up and up and up, at the same time as the group collecting pensions is getting larger and larger and larger. I mean, I don't know that that situation is sustainable forever. I get it. Politically, it was an idiotic thing for Badenoch to do.
Totally.
Especially in this kind of half-baked way that she tends to just shoot her mouth off. But it was also an opportunity for other people to think, is there a window here for some kind of cross-party consensus to sort this out? And the problem, the spanner in those works, of course, is reform. Because reform would never go with that. They would capitalise on it and go out and steal loads of pensioner votes from the Tories. And so, again, their influence is so much bigger than their vote deserves.
Well, I had to think about this and why she may have mooted it. And perhaps there is an acceptance that, you know what, the older voters maybe are lost to reform now that had previously backed the Conservatives. So maybe as a kind of new, refreshed Conservative Party, we need to start thinking about attracting younger voters. But then when I look at the polling on it, if she is trying to make the Conservatives attractive to Gen Z, this is not the way to do it. Young people are the most likely to favour a more generous interpretation of the triple lock than older people. They worry about their grandparents. They presumably worry about what might be left of the state pension by the time they reach retirement age. So this was not good politics in many respects, but certainly not if the hope was to say, all right, well, if the older voters aren't coming back to us, let's try the young. They're not keen on it either.
And also, it's part of exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? Young people have become hypersensitive to stuff that was there for previous generations being taken away from them, and are very likely to view this as the next thing. It's like, is that right? Just as we're growing older now, you're going to start reviewing pensions, are you?
Quiet, Riot. Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Quiet, Riot.
Let's move on now to slightly further afield issues, though closer to home than the USA. The World Economic Forum kicks off in Davos tomorrow, just as Trump takes to the stage. Armed conflict around the world is expected to dominate their agenda, alongside extreme weather. But in the survey of delegates pre-event, that seems to be the thing that they're concerned about, from Syria to Ukraine, Sudan, and beyond. But as global leaders head to the Alps, a ceasefire in Gaza has been brokered. Alex, dare we hope it will last?
Yes, we should hope, but it is a hope, right? Look, it's a good thing, objectively. Anything that stops the killing and allows Palestinians to rebuild and allows Israeli hostages to get back home, it is objectively a terrific thing. But if the ceasefire holds, the very next item on the agenda is an election. And that creates, I think, quite perverse incentives for the Israeli government. An Israeli government that has historically, both recently and further back, been really good at kind of breaking deals and blaming everyone else for it. It's in so many steps, and it requires so many different things to happen on the ground that I can't help but feel a lot of stuff can go wrong. But the fact remains that every peace deal starts with a pause, even a pause that fails, and then you go back to it and slightly alter the terms and try again. But without this, there is nothing further on. So this has to be a great thing. The thing I would really keep an eye on is what happens to humanitarian assistance.
So the ceasefire comprises, I think, 3 discrete phases over a pretty long period of time, and the details aren't entirely clear on it all. You know, the deep specifics of hostage exchanges. But we do know what the early ones are. We do know what the early geographical markers are of where troops need to withdraw to. We do know that in phase 1, 600 trucks of aid are meant to be allowed in and that bombing will cease. And then phase 2 will be when the remaining hostages, both dead and alive, are negotiated on, further troop withdrawals and aid into Gaza agreed. And the primary concern at the moment is that there may only be a phase 1, as you say, maybe it's a pause before reaching a longer term settlement. And that's partly because it's not really clear who is going to be responsible for overseeing phase 2, not least, of course, if there is a change of administration in Israel. And in terms of how the Israeli public seem to be responding to it at the moment, like you have mentioned, huge relief that there is some kind of breakthrough, the release of some hostages, but the army is completely exhausted, and Netanyahu's far-right opponents are really pushing for him to keep going. So I just wanted to sort of set out that for people that maybe haven't followed it, and allow you to then talk about why keeping an eye on the humanitarian stuff is key.
Well, because in previous cessations, that's the bit that hasn't happened in reality. There's always been, in the previous pauses, it was so that humanitarian assistance could increase quite radically, and it increased only in trickles. So if this time we see a proper flooding in of food, medicine, not just that, but also materials to start rebuilding infrastructure, then I would take that as quite a good sign that the ceasefire is on a solid path. But it will require goodwill from both sides, because I promise you there will be some nutcase that takes advantage of it and walks into somewhere with an explosive. There will be an IDF soldier that panics about something and shoots. These things will happen. And both sides have a choice to either react to them by saying, it's a blip, let's keep our eye on the big picture, or they can react to it by saying, this proves bad faith, so the whole deal is off.
And Hezbollah, as I understand it, have congratulated the Palestinians for, negotiating this deal. So there does sort of seem to be wider support in the region for this to succeed, and let's hope it does. Further afield, of course, Biden will hope that this is what his end of his reign is remembered for, that part of his legacy will be having overseen this. But we also have Donald Trump in true character form claiming this victory is his. And so, Alex, I know that you're sort of slightly ambivalent about this. Is the deal something we do need to give Trump some credit for? Because without the looming deadline of his inauguration, some argue it simply wouldn't have happened in this time frame.
I think this was an instance where exactly what we were discussing last week and many months ago, when I was trying to explain that sometimes second and third order effects of terrible things can be good things. This was a combination of both of them. I mean, Biden did 95%, or rather the Biden administration did 95% of the heavy lifting behind the scenes, of the detail, of the negotiation from the Western side, I should say, because obviously Qatar did a lot of the heavy lifting in the region. But the fact of the matter remains that they've been trying to do that for a long time, and the situation was stuck. It wasn't moving in any direction. And so Trump's inauguration and his quite mad, unspecific threats about all hell breaking loose are the catalyst that unstuck it. And I think he did that quite knowingly. I think it was quite a calculated move. So whether coordinated with the Biden administration or not, the fact remains that the two of them, the outgoing and incoming presidents, they basically worked together to create a situation where a negotiation that had been not advancing suddenly made progress. And I think they both deserve credit for that.
Quiet, riot. I think we need to talk about TikTok.
So the Supreme Court this week made its decision that a ban of social network TikTok did not infringe First Amendment rights in the States. So just a very brief history. the US government has been trying to force TikTok to either sell its American operation, as it were, to someone else, or threatening to ban the social network from the States because they consider it effectively a state actor. They consider it too closely affiliated with the Chinese government, as I guess most companies are in China, and a potential security risk because, it's in everyone's phones, basically, possibly looking at your data. And, they were just generally unhappy about it. ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, had basically said this was an infringement of its users' rights to free speech and its own rights of freedom to publish. And so that failed unanimously in the Supreme Court. And this means that now TikTok has to either be sold or be banned from today, Sunday. Potential buyers are apparently lining up. Bloomberg News reported on Tuesday that Musk was looking at purchasing TikTok. He's denied that. Because the ban comes into effect on Sunday, it will be up to Trump to operationalize it, which complicates things, I think, a bit further because, TikTok is threatening it will go dark unless it gets an assurance from the Biden administration. And the Biden administration are going, I guess, quite rightly, look, we're only going to be in power for another 24 hours. We can't really bind the next presidency. And, and our assurance would mean nothing. The person you need an assurance from is Donald Trump. Do you think this will be a real and instant ban, Naomi, or will it basically mean that people can't download it anymore? There'll be no updates,
That's right. So basically, it'll kind of erode over time. So as you say, unless a buyer is found and ByteDance choose to sell by Sunday today, then effectively TikTok no longer works in the US. What does that mean? Well, it means that you won't be able to download it from the App Store. So over time, basically the app will cease to function and make it very, very difficult to use for content creators and consumers. So over time, that's what's going to happen.
And make it increasingly a security risk, I think, because a lot of the updates have to do with plugging holes that are vulnerabilities. Right. So actually, you could be creating a problem for a lot of people who have this on the phone. You could effectively be making a bit of a backdoor.
Indeed. And I think that is really getting to the nub of what this is about. If you care about protecting people and their freedoms and civil liberties and all the rest of it with regards to data use by a state actor, then this has got to be about regulating social media, not about banning one particular company. And what we've seen from many of the content creators who are members of the Creator Fund on TikTok, i.e. the people who monetize what they publish on the platform in order to earn an income and plug, products to their users or their followers who can then go into TikTok shop and purchase them, and commission is given to those that have been selling them. They are now leaving TikTok for the Chinese-owned company as well, Xiaohongshu, which is Red Note. It's a little red book. It's like Mao's little red book is a direct translation, effectively. And that app, which is incredibly similar, but does even more than TikTok, it allows in-phone calling, in-app calls, and things like that. So it's really a kind of like a FaceTime combined with a TikTok app, requires the content fund members, the creators, to give far more of their personal information over to that Chinese company than TikTok ever required. And coupled with all of that, everything is in Mandarin. So when you are agreeing to the terms and conditions, unless you are an American fluent in reading Chinese Mandarin, you have got absolutely no idea what you are signing up to. defiant American content creators are saying, fuck it, we didn't want you to ban TikTok. We didn't give a shit about the Chinese state having all of our data. And in fact, we're going to give them even more. And there are now some quite hilarious dubbed videos from American content creators being dubbed over into Mandarin over on Red Note, which, it's the perverse outcome
the law of
and
unintended
the unintended consequence of a policy change. And really what the American legislature should have been doing was looking about social media regulation in the round, which of course Elon Musk would have not wanted and would have pushed back very heavily on, and Mark Zuckerberg and the others.
And that remains my point throughout all this. I do not understand how you can square freedom of speech absolutism with banning a company like TikTok while leaving completely unregulated spheres like Twitter, arguably more unregulated because it's a privately owned company, so he can do whatever he wants and does. Why is it that we automatically distrust the intentions of foreign state actors while trusting the intentions of someone like Musk, who has, honestly, the resources of a small country and his own agenda? I don't understand why consumers' data, for instance, needs to be guarded from the Chinese government, but not from Elon Musk.
I shared a meme on Blue Sky about the kinds of guys who believe that a tech bro billionaire like Elon Musk has got your interests at heart are the same kind of guys who believes that the stripper genuinely fancies them. Because it's not an ideology about freedom of speech and expression. It's about an ideology of the rich getting richer. Absolutely. And the billionaires that are allied to the politicians of the day, milking us for all we're worth.
The interesting thing is how Trump will react, because he's been on a journey on this. It was initially Trump that started this ball rolling. He really wanted TikTok banned, and now he doesn't. So he's changed his tune completely, having, like I said, started this entire process.
And not an insignificant number of Americans do derive a very good living from their TikTok content creation.
And I do wonder whether the fact that the right wing and the far right is right now doing very well on TikTok, both in the States and across Europe, actually, it's been very much their social platform. The AfD in Germany, Reform here, they're plugged into TikTok in a big way. So I wonder if that's changing things.
How do you plan to stop the ban on TikTok next month?
We'll take a look at TikTok. I have a warm spot in my heart for TikTok because I won youth by 34 points. And there are those that say that TikTok has something to do with that. Now, Joe Rogan did, and some of the other people that were recommended by my son Barron, he knew names. I said, who is that? Tell me, who's that? Dad, you got to be kidding. I can't believe you don't know. And I did those interviews, and it was actually sort of cute, if you want to know the truth. But we did them, and that had an impact. But TikTok had an impact, and so we're taking a look at it.
Maybe he'll come in and use it as yet another negotiating tool in his big negotiation with the Chinese.
Maybe, but I'm not going to hold my breath for Donald Trump presidency 2.0 to come in and properly regulate the tech giants.
Oh, he won't do that. He won't do that. But like I said, he just might not ban TikTok.
Quiet riot. Well, I think it is time to call ceasefire on today's show, Alex. Thank you very much for chewing the fat with me once again.
My pleasure, and huge thanks to our listeners, as always, for tuning in. Don't forget the editorial meeting next Sunday at 11 a.m., at which it will be mandatory to have listened to that day's Sunday school before attending. You will be quizzed.
I'd better put my ears open. And as an extra spur, should you need one, if you sign up on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and join our Ko-fi only Discord channel, you will get an early preview of our brand new shiny podcast, Alex's Podyssey, on Sunday evening. Very exciting. You do not want to miss that. And that's going to be exclusively for our followers who are on our Discord channel.
It's all very real.
He's very nervous, everybody. So come and show some love once you've heard that teaser. And in the meantime, have a lovely rest of your weekend. We'll see you again tomorrow night in the wee hours and again on Friday. Remember, not Thursday.
And don't forget how much we love you. We look forward to your return. Goodbye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot. If the older voters aren't coming back to us, let's try the young. They're not keen on it either.
Sorry, just 1 second. I mean, how stupid am I? Why would I have an almond in the middle of all that? In the middle of all that, I reached out and put an almond in my mouth. So now my mouth is full of crunchy almond bits.
An almond is very dry. It's a very dry thing to eat.
I know, and it takes ages to get rid of.
And you get all bits stuck in your teeth as well.
Oh, for God's sake. Sorry.